Good day, everyone across North America. This is John Garmendi with Sony's Professional Solutions of America, welcoming you to a very special edition of our Tech Tuesday webinar. For those of you who have been tuning in over the past few years, welcome back. And for those of you who are new, welcome aboard. As you know, we've been doing these ongoing series of webinars so that our customers, end users, channel partners, and consultants can all stay informed and up to date on Sony's latest products and solutions. Today's webinar, as I mentioned, is a very special Tech Tuesday, and it's entitled SLS-1A, Sony's new powered line array speaker. Today, our product engineering team will be joined by Alan and Jonathan Braun, principals at Braun Consulting, and we'll dive into the many features of the SLS-1A, and we'll also go over some of the highlights and a little bit about audio, or actually quite a bit about audio in detail. So I think you're in for a real treat today. Before we start, as always, some housekeeping. As in previous webinars, please submit your questions via the in-event question panel. We will also drop links to any of the references or resources that we discuss here today in the chat panel. And we'll also provide a link to all of our previously archived Tech Tuesday webinars. So again, I'm very honored and thrilled to introduce our guest panelists, Alan and Jonathan Braun, principals from Braun Consulting, and Terrence Boyd, our commercialization manager for projectors and for this line array speaker. So come on, join us as we chat a bit about this new technology, and I'll meet you back here for some Q&A. So I'm going to start by throwing a question out to the group, and it's very simple. Guys, how important is the function of sound in commercial AV applications today?
Well, let me kind of take the bull by the horns and then wait for what my friend Terrence and my partner Jonathan have to say. As the resident academic in this little group that we've got, the interesting part, you can tell that I have the gift of age. And I started back in the AV industry back in the 1980s, and I grew up in the 1950s and 1960s. Yes, I am that old. But in the beginning of what we know as the AV industry, there was no V. I mean, let's get this straight right now. There was no V. Way back in the day, if you wanted something that was visual, you had to go to a cinema and you would see a 35 millimeter film, or a youngster, you'd see a 16 millimeter projector going clackety 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 in the back of your classroom, or a film strip. So I know I've dated myself, but the bottom line is, in the beginning, there was no visual. It was literally an audio medium. Think about Franklin Delano Roosevelt and the fireside chat and all of those historical things that drive my trusty partner crazy when I get into my historical rants. But if we fast forward to today, what we have evolved, and in some cases devolved. Probably not a pleasant word to use, but in some cases we've devolved. And in this particular case, we understand that there are some system designers out there that pay equal homage, if you will, to audio and video. They do. I mean, these are the people that understand that audio and video is a true balance. Now, regretfully, it's kind of the exception rather than the rule. I hate to say it, but it's absolutely true. But as the academic on board, and as somebody who does the research, both industry-wise and for our own company, I can tell you it's very interesting. So the motion picture experts group, easy for me to say, the MPEG group, when they were trying to figure out their compression algorithms for their codecs, their coder decoders, which of course is everything that we use, compression and decompression, they did exhaustive studies, as well as the Sound Engineers Society did exhaustive studies on audio and video. And here's what they came up with. They came up with the fact, and I love it, and I'm going to quote it. The MPEG group came up with the fact that audio is a more profound contributor to what they call the complete audience experience than video. Now, think about that. It is a more profound effect on us, giving a complete audience experience. And they talk about the psychological benefits, they talk about the emotional benefits, and they talk about the physical benefits. So, to round out the answer to your question, John, audio is truly a major component that, and we were talking before we got on the program today about it's kind of taken for granted too often. It's an afterthought. The first thing you see is visual, so we think, I mean, go to the big trade shows, what do you see? All the big beautiful displays, and audio is off to the side. I'll end by saying this, John. It should not be, if you believe research, not Sony's opinion or Braun's opinion or Terrence or Jonathan or John, not our opinion. If you look at research, it absolutely proves that audio has a more profound contribution to what the MPEG group calls the complete audience experience.
Yeah, thank you, Alan. I knew that you would come with facts, and we appreciate you sharing that, and I think that's a great way to kick off this panel. I've got a follow up question, and wanted to ask you about some of the emerging trends that we're starting to see in how sound is being delivered to listeners, particularly in commercial AV applications.
Jonathan, you want to take this, or you want me to start it and then have you and Terrence blend
No,
in?
go ahead. You're on a roll. Take a stab at it. I've got my comment as well.
Yeah, I appreciate this question, and this is going to surprise some people, I think, when they hear this. So, again, research based. I'm not. One of my favorite phrases is I'm not really impressed with what I know, but I'm extraordinarily impressed with what I don't. And when I can find out something new, I can't wait to share it with somebody. Terrence and John have heard this. Of course, Jonathan has heard this, and the industry has heard my favorite phrase. But I'm impressed with what I don't know. So I kind of dug into this a little bit, and so I got four areas where we can talk trends or practices, and I won't use the word best practices, but check this out for a second. So the first one is miniaturization and audio built in. I don't care whether we're talking about a display, whether we're talking about, how many Sony projectors have audio built in a speaker, how many Sony or other displays, flat panels have audio built into them. And to be really frank with you, when you turn on, I've got a Bravia sitting here, and it's like I turn on the Bravia audio, and you go, that's not too bad, right? But that is a trend. A trend is towards miniaturization, making it smaller and built in. That's number one trend. Number two trend, and it's good and bad, is sound bars. It's sound bars. We've got these these little tiny sub rooms that we put a flat panel in, maybe a projector. Yes, I am a projector person, so yeah, I do love my projectors, especially some of the new compact projectors like Sony just brought out. So kind of turned on by projectors, but we got a sound bar. That's what you do. You put a sound bar in, and you have this little huddle space, and you got people around a small table, and you have 4, 5, 6 people, and everybody is fat, dumb, and happy. Well, that's both good and bad, because then it begs the question: is that really quote unquote good audio? That's another discussion, and perhaps, John, a whole nother webinar. Wireless, of course. Everything is, I don't care what wireless methodology you want to use, but it's like, if I don't need no stinking wires, I want to go wireless. And of course, I'm sure that everybody listening to this program understands the pluses and minuses of wireless. And then last but not least is one that I've learned a lot about. And Jonathan's kind of helped me in this area, because he's been kind of a student of that. And this is power over Ethernet. As we try to get our commercial integration systems more simplistic, et cetera, if we can do power over Ethernet, we've got some significant benefits. And of course, there's some pluses and minuses to that. So miniaturization, audio built in, sound bars, wireless, power over Ethernet. Jonathan, kick it over to you. That's kind of what I'm seeing.
I'm only going to add one, and that's going to be something that I'm sure many people out in the audience are already going to catch, is the use of the network as a transport. Power over Ethernet's a great concept that can be good and bad. It's good in the case of convenience, but it's bad in the case of it really does limit our output, especially if you've got a power over Ethernet speaker, because you're really only able to deliver what PoE is capable of. And it's better, but it needs to improve some before it can really drive a speaker for a decent sized space. But network as a whole, as a transport medium, and this is something that's actually going across the whole audiovisual industry, where you start to see increasingly not only the associations like the SDVOE Alliance and that are helping drive things forward, but AV over IP is a reality today. But specifically for audio, Dante, it's a huge thing. Audinate's done an amazing job with that protocol. And now it's a reality where I can have speakers that are networked and I don't have to worry about a lot of the challenges of things like traditional speaker cable, where I'm dealing with all of the electrical properties of that cable. I can have that convenience. And it's also great when I can say, hey, I'm going to integrate that with processing, where now we've got way more advanced DSPs than we ever did before. And we can link all that to our technology really readily. And that's making things a lot better from an infrastructure standpoint. And frankly, it's probably giving the people who are pulling the wires a lot less blisters. And for those of us who are a little retentive about cable management, yours truly, it's a lot neater to build too. But that one's just vanity.
Got it. Got it. All very good points. Obviously, those are some very important trends, and we've spoken now in just those two questions in just a few minutes, right? Um, we've covered a few parts of the equation, right? Alan spoke about the V, right? We've spoken a little bit about the A and how important that is. We've spoken about the transport medium and how we deliver, right? Let's talk about another part of the equation that adds to the viewing experience, right? The audience experience. And Jonathan, for you, let's talk about the environment, right? So, what are some of the challenges that we have in harmonizing sound and displays in a typical commercial setting, like a conference room, a classroom, an auditorium, even?
Sure, absolutely. This is as much an art as it is a science when we're dealing with this level of acoustics, where we're really having to look at how the audio performs in a space. And I see it here in my office where I've had to try and do my best to minimize things like reflection, because the room has a strong impact and that will help guide your speaker choice. Whether I'm going to point source, I'm going to a line array, I'm putting the speakers in ceiling. So what we have to look at is how the space influences your audio. And it can influence video as well, but what you're going to run across is, depending on the type of speaker you may use, we have to direct the audio so that it is not only heard by the audience, it's not disrupted by the environment. We also want to make sure that we're maintaining not just quality, but also audibility, loudness for the whole audience across the space. And it's kind of what we've been seeing as a larger driving trend in the industry, looking towards the experience. We need to make sure that when we're utilizing a speaker system in a space, actually, to Alan's point about sound bars, that's one of the things that they're not great at, but they can work in a pinch. It's better than using TV speakers. But if I'm designing a home theater, I want proper audio, not just to drop in a sound bar, but hey, that's better than nothing. Well, when we're looking at a conference room or whatnot, yes, having proper audio is best. So again, looking at the environment, reflections from hard surfaces, reflections off the furniture. That's one people sometimes will overlook, where I didn't take that into account. Oh, I did my modeling and I looked at the room, and then we dropped in a giant table with let's say a glass or a marble top, and oh wait, now it sounds really echoey in here. Gee, I wonder why. And there's other technical things that you can get into, like making sure that you've got proper, the lip sync delay with your video signal distribution that some people overlook. And then we end up looking like the actors in a Godzilla film, where my voice doesn't match up with my actual lip movements. But the room itself has a huge impact.
John, I would be remiss if I didn't call you out in a positive way. I want to remind everybody what the question was. And the question, John used the word harmonizing sound and displays. So kudos to John for using the word harmonizing the displays in an audio discussion. I just want to add, I just thought that was punny as all get out. So thank you, John, for my one smile of the morning. I want to add just a couple things to what Jonathan said, and I want to go back to the edifice, to the building, to the actual room itself. Now we have some institutions. The two that come to mind, obviously, are the Sydney Opera House and like Carnegie Hall. But a lot of educational institutions. My former college background, I designed theaters and things like that, and we didn't have parallel walls. We didn't have the floor and the ceilings were not parallel. So we've got to take all those things, and basically what happens, and no disrespect to architects, but architects are not typically audio experts. They're basically experts at structure and getting the size and the shape and all of this. But we've got columns in rooms. You've got ducts that maybe stick down 8 or 10 inches from a finished ceiling. You have parallel walls, parallel ceilings, and if you look at that graphic that was up there a few seconds ago, and you look at sound bouncing all over everywhere, and that's a great graphic. That really is. And we're not trying to trash point sources and whatever, because they're everywhere. But the problem is, look at all of the reflections, and it can be reflections off of table surfaces, etc. So from an audio design perspective, especially in commercial AV, we can't just stick a group of speakers up and hope, maybe pray, that the audio is going to sound the way it wants to sound. In lighting design, we would go around a stage, and we had what we call a general illumination wash, and we would go around the stage. And you basically, it's interesting, you'd hold your hand up and you'd walk across the stage, side to side, front to back, up stage to down stage, stage left to stage right. And you'd hold your hand up and you'd see the light falling on your hand. And we're checking for even distribution. Well, you obviously can't do that with audio, but you can with an SPL meter, and you've got to go around the room. And when you've got all these obstructions and interferences, there you go, John. You use harmonizing, I'll use interferences, so we'll be equally punny here. But if you've got these obstructions and distractions to the audio signal, you got a problem. And so the ultimate holy grail is, okay, I'm not going to change the architectural design. I'm not going to change parallel walls and this, and I'm not going to hang beautiful, baffles, sound baffles, and like a recording studio. It just isn't going to happen, and it's not going to be Carnegie Hall, and it's not going to be a City Opera House. It's going to be XYZ company or XYZ educational institution. So these are the things we have to take into consideration. Is it serious? You bet. I think it's very serious.
Apologies. Yeah, I guess I should have said no pun intended after using the word harmonize, and that that was that was a great couple of minutes of discussion there, because not only did we talk about harmonizing within the environment, but I like that you both gave examples of how we overcome some of the unique aspects that really present some challenges to our systems integrators and the design consultants as well. So thank you very much for adding that.
John, let me just add one more thing,
Sure.
because it's important that this is not just an SLS-1A webinar. This is really an audio webinar, talking about important audio issues. One of the things that we need to understand is that audio needs to be designed. I'll say it again. Audio needs to be designed. Why? Because it's not one size fits all. It's not an online order of a speaker system and you're going to be just mesmerized by the quality. Audio requires design. And if we believe the MPEG group, and if we believe that that is most profound part of the audience experience, audio needs to be designed. thank you for letting me interject.
Sure. No, that's a really important point. It's far from plug and play, if you will, right? To do
Yeah.
it right. So
Yes.
that's really key. That's really key. I know that the both of you, like many of our customers and some consultants as well, who joined us about 2 weeks ago in New York City. You've had the ability to experience the SLS-1A, and having been able to see it, and more importantly, hear it perform. I'd love to get some of your feedback on on what you thought and what we showed.
You're keeping us amused. You want our feedback, John, on an audio product?
There's another one. Yep, and
Jonathan,
pun intended on that one.
thank you very much. You can tell I'm going to hold your feet to the fire. We all need a few more smiles in our life, folks. Jonathan, you want to take off, or you want?
Yeah.
I'll fill in the blanks with color commentary.
Yeah, absolutely. I won't make any more audio puns. How about that? But no, I was really impressed with the speaker, because what the SLS-1A kind of represents is a change in thinking in the industry, where we're going back to our previous couple of questions and some comments that were made. We have to be very purposeful in our design now. Spaces are getting more varied, and we ultimately need more control, which has led to a bigger consideration. Previously, line arrays were not commonly used for smaller spaces. Line arrays have been used for larger theaters and auditoriums, concert venues for some time, because of their natural properties and how they can differently deliver sound than a traditional point source speaker does. But now that we're starting to see very compact line arrays like the SLS-1A come out, that opens up new uses for this type of technology in areas we haven't been able to before. Of course, it sounds good. It's a Sony speaker. Sony's kind of known for audio, especially in the consumer world, but it's kind of the first major Pro AV product on the audio side. It sounds great, but I love the form factor. I like the fact that it's modular, and some of the unique audio properties, because it is a steerable line array. When we can leverage a DSP, and DSP is kind of magic to those of us. I'm a video guy, I'm not an audio guy. I know enough to be dangerous, and I can make the system sound okay, but I'm a video guy. So to me, DSP is voodoo. It's literally dark magic. But the reality is it can do some incredible things, and I really appreciated getting to hear a speaker that's got really fine control of the audio beam, where just like we use beamforming microphones to make up for issues in a room, now we can use beamforming speakers to help make up for issues in an environment. Again, back to our previous conversation. So again, overall, very positive impression of the product. I enjoyed the audio quality, but I really liked its capabilities in that regard.
For color commentary, I normally, as you all probably have figured out, I like to relate specifically to data, but I've got to take you on a real quick little journey here, and just permit me to do this, John. I want to take you on a little bit of a journey. So, I first saw it. I've seen it two or three times. Had demonstrations, been around demonstration two or three times. The first time I walked in a room and I saw it, I thought, "Isn't that an interesting little compact speaker?" But my tongue was firmly planted in my cheek, like, okay, how can this actually be different, right? So the demonstration, I walk into the room, and I start walking around the room, and for a change, I kept my mouth shut and my ears open, and I walked around the room, and with the speakers, and the first thing, and I looked over at Jonathan and I said, "Come here." He said, "What do you want?" I said, "Come here." And I said, "Walk with me." And he and I walked around the room, and I said, "What do you get?" And he says, "What do you mean?" I said, "Intelligibility." Now, maybe this is maybe I'm showing my old age, but forgive me. It was remarkably intelligible. And if you think about the profound, objectives of sound, one is it's got to be loud enough, and number two, it's got to be intelligible. So my first thing was intelligible, and then I thought this is cool. And my second impression, And all the things Jonathan said about steerability are absolutely true. Just reference back what we were talking about with architectural challenges. But here's number two. Number two is there is no sweet spot. Now, time out. Think about this a quick minute. When you hit an audio system, there's almost always, using a point source, a traditional system, there's almost always a sweet spot. The sweet spot is when the left and right speakers overlap, and there's a sweet spot. And you go too far right or too far left, and you're going to be out of the sweet spot, and it's not going to be the same, yes, MPEG group audience experience that we experience if I've got total uniformity of coverage. So first was intelligibility, and the second thing, because of the ability of the SLS-1A to be, to be vertically coverage and also horizontally cover, which is unique to the SLS-1A. It was coverage. There is no sweet spot. It sounds good no matter where you are. So, John, those are, in addition to what Jonathan said, that's my color commentary on intelligibility and coverage.
And Alan and John, if I may, just to kind of add to that, Sony did use some unique technologies in creating this new product. The SLS-1A is, and first of all, by eliminating distortions, we use some different technologies like a square flat driver, right? So we developed a square flat driver specifically for this product, as well as using a magnetic fluid suspension to help eliminate some of that distortion as we deliver sound in all of these different spaces, and especially and Alan and Jonathan, as you guys talked about the different challenges to some of these different spaces, being able to deliver that sound losslessly and accurately throughout that space. I think by leveraging some of that technology is something that we feel like that this speaker is going to perform really well, in doing
Wasn't this I think I heard in one of the demonstrations that I attended, one of the three that I attended, Terrence, isn't this a proprietary speaker designed to Sony?
It is, yes, absolutely, it is.
So in other words, it was designed with intelligibility, to use my phrase, but actually for clarity and improved frequency response. Not to get too techie with it, but
Yeah.
it was designed with that in mind. Am I correct about that?
That's right. That's right. And because of that, we're able to use this particular line array speaker in so many different applications. The width and scope and the type of applications that we can use this in the different environments that this type of speaker system can be used in is way beyond even where I think our initial ideas were. And as we start to talk to customers and listen to the different ways in which they can see and use this particular type of line array speaker in the different environments, it was even humbling for us to kind of learn, as we go and as we launch this product.
Mm.
So, Jonathan, I want to go back to something you said. You touched upon control, right? When we were talking about your impressions of the of the system, but can you elaborate a little bit more on how you think this new solution will allow integrators and designers more control over their designs?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually the important word there, is control. Like we were talking about earlier, audio must be purposefully designed. When you just throw a speaker on the wall and you just hope for the best, you may end up with something that's audible, but not necessarily enjoyable or intelligible. So, what something like the SLS-1A offers, and again, that kind of back to my comment about we're starting to now see these kinds of compact line arrays starting to emerge because they have some natural benefits where I can manage where the audio goes, because a line array speaker is producing audio differently than a point source speaker. A point source speaker just radiates everywhere in all directions like a dome. But a line array will be able to radiate more or less, looks something like a cylinder if you actually chart it coming out from the speaker, or half a cylinder. So it's projecting it more straightforward. And when we add in DSP and the capability to steer, because you have these smaller square speakers, and by the way, the square part, Terrence didn't mention it, but the square part's actually important because as we're lining the speakers up side by side with each other, that's part of how it's able to steer as well as it does, because you don't have a round speaker driver you have a square one, that means they're even to each other, and you don't have that curve, that circular shape for the speaker driver where your audio is coming out at different rates from that cone. So that actually is something inherent to that unique speaker design that makes it more steerable. And that's one of the important parts, is if you look at how these speakers radiate, and then we add in the steerability and the fine beam control that something like the SLS-1A does, that's part of why we're seeing people want to adopt line arrays in more environments, like being able to have a phantom center channel. You're going to have displays that don't have speakers. We want the center channel. Like if I'm talking to you on a video conferencing call, I want my voice to be coming from my face if at all possible. That's where your center channel comes in cinema for dialogue, right? And now we can do things like replicating a phantom center. We can have that fine beam control to get the audio where it needs to go, consistent audio. And that really is the benefit of this type of technology. And yes, it does put the integrator back in control, pun intended, back in control of that audio design in that room.
John, I want to just one color commentary based on what Jonathan said at the end. I totally agree with what he was saying, but what one of my concerns, and he and I have this discussion with different people in the industry all the time, is that when we talk about an integrator needing to be in control of a project, and I've written fairly extensively on this in the magazines I write for, Commercial Integrator. There's a plug, unsolicited, unpaid, I might add. But I write on topics that I'm passionate about. One of the passions that I've got is, and you and Terrence are very well aware of my passion for the need for AV integration companies, not just to continue to exist, but to actually flourish. And one of the things is that in an era of commoditization where people just basically do their research online and they come up with answers that they think they know, and it's very difficult for a salesperson to walk into a company and tell a customer, what you think you know is not necessarily what you need to know. And so this commoditization of the industry puts the AV integration company out of control. They've already made up the end user has already made up their mind what display they're going to use and what this and what that and what something else. And there absolutely is nobody to step in other than, you guessed it, the commercial integrator or the pro AV company, if you will, design, build firm, pick your name. But there is nobody other than us to say to a customer, what you think you know is not necessarily what you need to know. Does this work with this? Does that work with that? And so what the SLS-1A does is it truly is putting a technology and a design necessity back in the hands of the integrator and back in the hands of designers. So yes, the product has controllability, and we've talked about the necessity of that. I think Jonathan was right on. But there's a controllability factor for the AV integration company that the SLS-1A really fulfills. And I think other than intelligibility, and there is no sweet spot, I think my third favorite part of this whole equation, John, is that it does put the controllability of projects back where it belongs, to the AV integration companies.
Fantastic. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Jonathan. I'm going to throw one more out here to the panel before we jump into questions from our audience. And Alan, you ended your last one saying, putting things into the hands of the integrators and the designers, or back into. And along those lines, I got to ask, we're with this new product and really solution introduction, we like to think that Sony is putting the audio back into AV. And based on your experience with the SLS-1A, what does that mean to you guys?
Well, I'll head it up and then let Jonathan add some more profundity to the. And yes, I did use the word profundity. That's my word of the day. I'll tell you what when the phrase is Sony puts the audio back in AV. I'll tell you what it means to me historically, and that is, and I'm sad, and I started out this whole conversation, John, by saying that we are a visual medium. Jonathan and I do a lot of work in digital signage, And digital signage is, one of the mantras is it's a digital medium. Is audio used somewhat? Yes, but it's basically a visual medium in digital signage. But AV, commercial AV, pro AV, design build industries, it's not just a visual medium. There is an audio component, and the audio component can be an assessment of sound, of ambient noise in a room. It can be an assessment of acoustics and what the audience needs to hear. So when I think about this, and I think with Sony puts audio back in AV, I think about this in the context of it puts audio front and center. I think we're not trying to trash or demonize video, and God bless the flat panels and projectors. Yes, I still am a projector guy, and the LED displays. Those are wonderful. What Sony putting the audio back in AV says to me is that it gives audio its due, number one, and number two, it puts the integration for, and again, my bias is I managed an AV integration firm for 7 years, starting back in the early 1980s. So, I mean, I've lived a life, but I know what AV integration firms can do. And I know that the SLS-1A gives AV integration firm another tool in their tool chest to actually deliver what AV integration firms are supposed to deliver. So when we say the SLS-1A puts, and Sony puts the A back in AV, it puts audio in the proper perspective. That's what I get out of it.
And I'll only add just a simple comment. Alan's completely right, and I think it's bringing an awareness back to, again, I said it earlier, I'm a video guy. I'm not an audio guy. And it's bringing awareness back to, we do need to be purposeful about this. This is not going to be news, by the way, to anybody who is an audio expert in the audience. You guys already know this, but it's bringing awareness back to that we can purposefully design. It helps make this more accessible with some of the tools that it has, like the steerability in that, where we can deliver a better quality experience. And I think it's helping raise that awareness back that we do need to do it, and we can, even for people like me that aren't really audio experts. We've got tools now that help us bring a richer, more rounded experience to the systems that we install, and potentially even able to deliver audio in places that we might not have. Like Alan mentioned, digital signage, where if we have the right type of speaker to get audio to the audience, that we might be able to apply that in ways where previously we likely would not have, because it could be disruptive or negative. So I just think it's an awareness factor to me.
John, maybe just permit me one thing before you jump to questions. A question that we haven't addressed, and I want to make sure, because we've talked about design, we've talked about the presence of audio, the importance of audio, the controllability of the line array, but one of the things that we haven't addressed is modularity. And I remember when I before I got into my rant on intelligibility and no sweet spot, the first thing I saw was these really cool little speakers, and we had, in the demonstrations that I saw, we had 3 or 4 speakers side by side at the bottom, 3 or 4 speakers up at the top, and 3 or 4 speakers on the side. So we were covering both vertical and horizontal, and I would be remiss if I didn't, although it's not as exciting maybe a concept as the the importance of audio in all of AV. That's an exciting topic. But if we think about modularity for a minute, and one size doesn't fit all, it's true. One size doesn't fit all. So if I'm reporting right, I think we can, Sony can put up to like 6 across and 6 horizontals and 6 vertical, and you can literally create your own modular footprint based on your room. And then, of course, you use things like ease focus, which is a great design tool. If you don't have ease as a major design tool, ease focus, it's free. You can download it, and it's a beautiful, beautiful design tool. So I'd be remiss, John, if I didn't give a plug for the modularity and the designability of being able to
Mhm.
take these little modules and do just about whatever you want to do with them from an audio perspective. So forgive me for the interjection, but I thought that was important to mention.
No, absolutely. Thanks for pointing that out. We've got a ton of questions. I don't know that we're going to be able to get to all of them, but let's try to jump right in and see how many we can address. And I'll start right here. David asks, or he starts out by saying, "Correct, Alan, about digital signage. So can this product help audio work for digital signage? In the past, audio was often a no-go for digital signage, but maybe that can change if we can steer audio better."
Well, the answer is I'll give the simple answer, which is yes, because of the steerability factor with the line arrays. I mean, one of the problems with audio and digital signage is, so let's say I've got audio in the boys wear department, and it's all about boys wear, and the girls wear department is right beside it, and how do we keep the audio just in the boys wear department, rather than going over to the girls wear department? But the simple answer is the controllability factor is important. But I'll turn it over to Jonathan because he may have some thoughts on that.
No, I think that's exactly right. Funny thing about audio is it follows the laws of physics, and sound waves don't respect a nice request to stay in like the automotive department and not broadcast over to housewares. So having steerable speakers has always kind of been a very desirable property for audio and digital signage. And that's what ended up with some of the crazy stuff we saw, like the sound domes and the use of ultrasonics and infrasound. But the reality is, if I can simply steer the audio and I don't have too bad an environment, back to the beginning of our conversation, I don't have too bad an environment, then that can help me approach that. And it's not that we haven't had the ability to steer audio in that way for a little while, it's just been much bigger. And so now this is a much more approachable. If I've got a 55-inch display, I'm not hanging a 4 foot tall speaker next to it. I'm now having something that's a lot more compact and
Yep.
approachable.
Yep.
So that's making it a little more possible. So yeah, I do think that will have a positive impact on digital signage.
I can say this about that, and that is that in the demonstrations that I saw, when I got completely off axis, so in other words, in my intelligibility coverage and no sweet spot, when I got completely off axis to where the speakers were set up, the sound falls off in a quantifiable, discernible manner. So that gives me some hope for audio in digital signage because of the controllability.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. Terrence, there's judging by the number of questions here, there's a great deal of interest, and of course, there's multiple questions. But I think the first one was from Deirdre, and the question, as you would expect, is how much and when can I have it? So,
Yeah, so we will start shipping this product in the January timeframe. So we've had a lot of customers asking about that. So we expect to start shipping orders in January. List price for this model for per individual unit is $16.99 on that, and yeah, and we did officially launch that here in the U.S. For the U.S. market a couple of weeks ago. We had a launch event in New York. I will say this product was launched worldwide back in May, right before the ISE in Europe. But we wanted to kind of hold up and take a look at this product to see how we can strengthen and improve it even further for our U.S. audience. We know that the needs of our AV community here, in the U.S. are can be much more stringent than some of the other regions abroad. So I think that taking that step back and then also talking with different folks in the AV community, such as Alan and Jonathan, and to kind of help us get an understanding of how we can approach the market with this. This was a part that we had to kind of go through and do. So now we're excited to officially say in January we'll be shipping that product.
One thing, and correct me if I'm wrong. Well, I'm not wrong about this because I asked Terrence the same question that we were just asked. I asked him about pricing because obviously we're not involved in it. We're not Sony employees, obviously. So I asked him about it. and we had a little discussion about it, and it's important to remember that when you take a look at the pricing structure, these are self-powered speakers, and it's important to, when you take a look at it and you do your cost comparative analysis, number one, take a look at the controllability, what the coverage is, intelligibility, all of those good things, but also keep in mind that things like the DSPs built in, and keep in mind that it's self-powered. So when you do that financial analysis, the return on investment is, at least the conversations that I've had with Terrence, the return on investment is pretty good relative to the SLS-1A.
Thanks, Alan. I'm looking at the question panel here. I see one from Adil, and it's a very simple question. What makes the Sony solution different than some of the other products that are already out there?
Well, I'll jump in and get that one real quick for you there, John. Um, Modular. Well, okay, there are some other products that are modular, but not modular at this size, so it's very compact. Having self-powered speakers. So as Alan just mentioned, that eliminates the cost of an amplifier. And there is some DSP capability built in. It doesn't truly replace an external DSP, but from what I saw and listened to, you've got some basic dip switches you can use for control to do basic steering, and then you can add a full DSP if you want to do completely custom steering. So having that integrated gives you a great option for managing the audio. And then I didn't get to play with it as much as I would like, but I know that there's some software from the SLS-1A itself that can help you with controlling it for firmware updates and volume and pairing and control. And I believe that works via Dante, which I was talking about earlier. And then Alan mentioned Ease Focus for the fancy stuff. It starts to get a little beyond me, but there you go. So it's kind of really taking a lot of different pieces that have existed in other speakers and kind of putting it together into a single unit, but making it so compact that it's now practical to use in smaller spaces. I don't know necessarily about as small as my home office here, but in a much smaller space, like in a conference room, where previously, as I was looking at a design, I probably would have used point source ceiling speakers. Now I would consider using something like this because it gives me a lot of added benefit and control.
And John, I would add to that I use the phrase "the sum is greater than the totality of its parts," and by that I mean everything Jonathan said is absolutely true. Self-powered, built-in DSP, at least entry-level DSP, things like that. But the other issue is, because of the speaker design, because of the modularity, the way that it's all put together, the when you do it, and I've only seen it in comparison to probably two or three of the and when I say competitors, I mean companies that build quote unquote similar speakers. The overall quality of the sound, the intelligibility, uniformity, clarity, sound pressure level, etc., was superior to any of the competitors that I looked at. So all in all, I think it's a package that moves the bar, right? It moves the bar. It raises that bar in this particular area of speaker technology, and again, puts the AV integrator back in control.
Thanks, Alan. I know we're getting close on time, but as a matter of fact, we might even be a little a little over. So I want to thank the audience for hanging in there, and we appreciate everyone's questions and comments. And again, there's that punt feedback, but there's a couple more. And folks, we're not going to be able to get to every question, but everyone knows who's attended these in the past. We do via registration capture any questions, and we do follow up. So hang in there, folks. Let's see. Couple of others here wanted to. Someone's asking about the software, whether it's the Ease Focus or the Sony supplied software. Terrence, is that required to to set up? Is that a requirement or?
So the SLS-1A software manager, basically what that's going to allow you to do is to download the firmware updates necessary for the speaker, for the system, and also it's going to allow some further control as far as how you assign and how you manage individual drivers, individual speakers, individual arrays. So you can name, and it's all based off the MAC address, and you can assign and create the naming and groupings, if you will. So it'll allow you to also manage the speakers on the network, on the Dante network. And so there's a lot of control there that's offered through the SLS-1A software that you can download and use with the speaker systems. And then, as I think Alan and Jonathan both had mentioned also, being able to use ease focus as well. With the SLS-1A, you can import your sound mapping files and basically pull those over into the SLS-1A software to help even further optimize the steerability and the sound placement.
Okay, great. And let's see, we've got this one appeared a couple of times, at least this topic appears a couple of times here in the chat panel. I've got it from both David and from Megan asking about the low end, low frequency response. Someone's actually looked up our specs here. They say it's at around 80 hertz, and they want to know, are we offering a subwoofer, or what's the story on that, Terrence?
Yeah, so as of right now, we don't offer a subwoofer for that, and that's because primarily we are looking at the individual modules, the line array modules, and focusing on the modularity of that. A lot of our audio customers that we work with, do build and develop integrated line array solutions for their customers, and so this SLS-1A becomes kind of more of another option from a quality sound standpoint, to be able to replace some of those other competitive models that are out there. We are kind of looking at whether or not we require or it's necessary for us to offer something like a matching subwoofer, but at this time we don't have that in the product roadmap. Most of the applications tend to be more in the kind of middle registers, if you will, for the human voice. And most of those voices tend to be a little bit higher range, I think. And so it seems to do well without the subwoofer. But, that doesn't mean you can't pair a third party subwoofer with that integrated system that you design and build.
Well, let me just add, from a demonstration point of view, from a kind of a non-Sony perspective, but so, the first thing after we got done listening to it and all of this, the first thing, you got these tiny little speakers. And of course, Jonathan used to run his own home theater company, and the one hallmark of all home theaters is subwoofer, subwoofer, subwoofer. And one of the things in one of our audio courses that we teach for the industry, we talk about the colorization, easy for me to say, colorization of sound. And some people will come in and say, man, I want more bass, or I want more high end, or I want more power, I want more loudness, using the improper use of the word loudness. But the interesting thing is, so we got done with the demonstration, and I said, this is interesting. And so we had this whole subwoofer conversation. So then the second time, and like I said, I've heard this 3 different times. So the second time I went in and I had another set of objectives, being an independent person and listening to the performance. And I turned to JR, one of the engineers, and I said, buddy, this doesn't need a subwoofer. And from a pure engineering technical point, and I'm not an engineer, Jonathan is, I'm not, but JR is. And I'm sitting there with JR and Jonathan, I'm going, this doesn't need a subwoofer, does it, guys? They go, nope. If you want uncolored, clear intelligibility, and I can't believe the amount of bass tones that we get out of this tiny speaker. So does it need a subwoofer? This is one vote for, in most speech intelligible situations, the answer is a subwoofer doesn't add anything to the equation. Now, if you're a guy that wants, you want to feel the vibration of the seat in the theater, yeah, you're probably going to want to do it, but you're probably not going to use our speaker system. So just to kind of to put an outside perspective on it, I don't think you need no stinking sub, but Jonathan, maybe you might, because I just don't think you do. And Jonathan's more
I
of a subwoofer guy than I am. So
yeah, no, I agree. For the vast majority of uses, conference rooms, video conferencing, training. No, it's honestly, at least from what I heard, I'm not an audiophile, but at least from what I heard, I 100% agree with Alan. I don't think that's necessary. You might want to if you're going to be using it for media as well as presentations or discussions like this one. But no, I don't think it's necessary either.
Okay, let's wrap up with one quick one. I know I said that last one was the last question, but there's one here that popped up from Quinton that's pretty interesting. And he asked, he said, we mentioned Sony unique technologies, especially around the the fluid as it's used in the speaker itself. But he says, quite frankly, ferrofluid has been around for quite some time. So what's so different now?
Well, one of the areas when we use the magnetic fluid suspension in our speakers, I think ferrofluid's typically used in tweeters, right? I think it's mostly used in tweeter type applications and speakers. Whereas I believe, from what I understand, the magnetic suspension fluid that we use for our speakers actually handles a wider range of frequencies in that speaker, and as far as the frequency response. Alan, Jonathan, if you have anything to add to that.
Well, the only thing I'd add to that is that, coupled with the unique design, the square design of the speaker. So with the fluid design and the unique design of the speaker coupled together, it gives you a range of frequencies, a range of frequencies. And I want to use the word clean in this particular case. That's what you get. You get a clean reproduction of sound with the combination of the speaker design, the square design, and the fluid coupling that you just don't get with in something like a tweeter or something like that.
Okay, that's a great note to end this on. Alan, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So first of all, I want to finish up by saying thank you so much, Jonathan and Alan, for joining us today. I promised our audience, our participants, that they'd be in for a treat, and you guys did not disappoint. So thank you so much. Always an honor to spend time with the both of you. So very appreciative for that. Very appreciative for our audience for hanging in there as we went a little bit over our normal Tech Tuesday time. But I think everyone, based on the questions and the engagement, really did enjoy it, and we look forward to taking the conversation beyond this webinar and engaging both via responses to your questions as well as having you engage always with our network of sales support engineers and your local regional account managers. And then lastly, I want to remind everyone, please join us again in 2 weeks on November the 8th, where we'll have yet another new product introduction, the latest projector in our laser business projector lineup, the VPL FHZ 51 and 61. And who knows, we might see Terrence again. So, again, thank you all for your time, as always. Enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe, and we'll see you here on November 8th. Take care, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.